Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. No, these are very large mics. Please move up a little bit. I know y'all are going to try and sneak out halfway through. Got a plan? Good morning. My name is Kara Kandel. I am the Vice President of Policy at ExcelinEd, and yes, I lost my name tag, which is why you can't see my name. But welcome. So excited to see all of you here at our summit. It's really something we look forward to all year long. I hope you do too. And I have the pleasure today of moderating. We'll see if you can call it that with these two. But I have the pleasure of moderating a discussion between these two amazing state chiefs, Secretary Katie Jenner and Secretary Jacob Oliva, one of the great state of Indiana. Go Hoosiers.
That's right.
I did go to IU, so I'm sorry I don't have a Razorbacks, right?
Razorbacks.
Okay. And one from the great state of Arkansas.
Okay.
So here. All right, and we are here today to discuss some of the just incredible reforms that are going on in both of these states. If you look around the summit, we have just the privilege of having so many state chiefs, reformers, legislators, people who are making such a huge difference in the lives of students and families here today. So let's make the most of this. We will leave time for questions. We're going to end on time because we need to get to lunch, but we will leave time for questions at the end. So I'm going to ask you to write it down, kiss your brain, do whatever you need to do to remember those questions. And please, when you come up, ask a question. That's the key. Okay, so I'm going to start with a question for the two of you. You are both responsible for K-12 education in your states, but I could read your very impressive and extensive bios, but instead I want to know, each of you probably has a teacher that sticks in your mind as a person who made a really big difference in your life. So this is key, Dr. Jenner. I'm looking at you. 2 sentences or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who was
tough.
that person,
Yeah.
and why? What impression did they leave on you, and why?
The first one that comes to mind is Mrs. Wanda Pride. She was my AP Calculus teacher in high school, and she had very, very high expectations, but she was not going to leave any of us behind. We knew that, but she pushed us hard every day, and I'm better for it today.
Okay.
So I'll do it really quick. I have 2 teachers.
You have 2 sentences, too, by the way.
I wasn't giving it to you. I got 2 teachers.
She set the rules.
So first, Miss Hammond, my kindergarten teacher, I still remember to this day when we would do circle time and she would read stories to us and would read upside down so the class could see the pictures. And I remember saying, I have to learn how to read upside down so that I can show my mom that she can see the pictures when I read to her. So that always stuck with me. And then Mr. Silva, middle school band teacher, who taught us, had a big sign in the back of the room that said, early is on time is late. And on time meant when the bell rang, he raised his baton and we were ready to make music. And so I always stuck with that and really appreciated
What
that.
did you play?
Percussion.
You were a drummer.
I allowed to make a lot of numbers.
Did anybody hear the drummers last night outside the hotel?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else was up that
Anyway,
late, Dr.
it might have been him out there banging on some drums.
Well, watch for it tonight. You never know what the state chief's band will be. It'll be real hot. Okay, now down to business. So you've been in your role for 4 years, I think you told us this morning, and you have we're going
almost
on
almost 2 years.
Almost 2.
Yeah.
Wow, time flies, doesn't it? When you're having fun.
So I said I'm making friends every day.
So tell us a little bit about, and let's start with you, Jacob. Tell us a little bit about when you took the job. What did you see as the greatest opportunities and the greatest challenges that you were going to face?
Well, so I was very fortunate to meet then Governor-elect Sanders, who had a bold vision on how to reform educational opportunities and outcomes for students in the state of Arkansas. So regardless of any metric that you looked at, whether it was NAEP scores, U.S. World and News, if you looked at how Arkansas did in 4th grade reading, 8th grade math, it didn't matter. We're going to rank somewhere between 40 and 50. And we had a governor that said that is not good enough. We had a legislator that said we need to do something different. I remember sitting in committee. We wrote a comprehensive omnibus bill called the LEARNS Act. And I remember even sitting in committee, had a legislator ask, well, what if this doesn't work? And I remember saying, great, we go from 45th to 46th. But if it does, we could be number 1. And what I think what we found, and I have this kind of saying that I like to follow along with that says bad systems beat good people every time. What we have found and what we had to do with LEARNS is create a system that was coherent. And it wasn't that we didn't have teachers working hard, going above and beyond. We didn't have students. It's not that we didn't have students that are capable and superintendents and school board members and principals. Everybody was working hard in a system that wasn't aligned. When I talk about our educational house, I think this is things that I would say to go back to you and your districts is if you're going to build a house, you have to have a strong foundation. You're going to lay a concrete slab. Those are called standards. Our ELA and math standards were confusing. They weren't clear. They weren't concise. They had too many verbs in it. Many states have been doing this same phenomenon that we were doing in Arkansas called unpacking standards. Shout out if you've ever unpacked a standard. That means you don't know what it means and you can't come up with a consistent definition. We had to rewrite standards. Foundation. Wall number one, what are the high quality instructional materials that we're giving to teachers to teach those standards, and are they aligned? So we had to build out our high quality instructional material portal. The second wall is what is the professional development that's going to work best for those teachers around the strategies that they know are going to use to implement that curriculum with fidelity to make sure the standards are being taught with clear, concise expectations for each grade level in every subject area. And then the roof that holds it together is a comprehensive assessment system. We had standards that nobody knew what they meant, professional development that wasn't aligned to really supporting curriculum, and an assessment system that measured college and career readiness. It wasn't giving any information back to teachers on how to inform instruction. So part of what we knew we needed to do and hit the ground running, and we did this. We just finished doing cut scores on a brand new assessment system with new test item specifications based on new ELA and math standards that we've done in under 2 years. So if you think you got to move slow to get that barge moving, we can show you how to do it because it can happen.
Yeah, and that doesn't even count the other stuff that you've done in 2 years too, right?
That's just it, making
only
friends.
Part of it. Dr. Jenner, to you.
So some people know the Indiana context, and I talked a little bit about it this morning, but what I didn't share this morning is when coming in as an appointed Secretary of Education, and those of you from Indiana know this, the DOE at the time, and the headlines in Indiana, it was very much DOE versus State Board of Ed, DOE versus House versus Senate versus Governor. And so educators on the ground, which I was an educator on the ground before coming in, it was whiplash, or we just ignored and tried to stay focused. So coming in, my number one was to relationship build. Indiana's a school choice state, but at the time, it was very, if you were a traditional public school, you were anti-charter school and non-pub most of the time, versus being for quality education for children, period. So we really changed our strategy and how we talk to people. But number one, we listened. We listened to a variety of different groups and listened to the common ground. And that common ground really set our agenda forward, in addition to our data. So we had 3 pillars of focus, still do. Number one, student learning and opportunities, including academic and college career readiness, skill development. Number 2, educator quality and value. And number 3, system alignment and capacity. And under each one of those, there are strategies, there are tactics, and we just moved. So much about, and you can probably say the same in the state chief role, it's all about who you surround yourself with. And it's all about building as many allies who are, quite frankly, better champions than we are, and just pointing to them over and over. And that's what we've done on repeat. I don't know that I would have told you I would have made it 4 years. Honestly, good luck to you, my friend. You're 2 years, so good luck. No, you'll make it. But I don't know that I did. I just every morning got up, one foot in front of the other, and just keep pushing, keep pushing. 4 big things that we heard common ground on in Indiana, where we had challenge area, but challenges present the opportunity to drive solutions. So I love when people bring up challenges. It's like, oh, good, we can try to solve this. So the 4 big ones, reading immediately rose to the top, making the 4 years of high school more valuable, so rethinking high school. Data transparency. Many people just didn't know where we were, and parents and families said, I don't know how to read your fancy charts. Can you make it simple? So we have moved to, you'll see us using heat maps in Indiana so people can see, oh, that's where I live. That's where, okay. You'll see us using a lot of infographics. And also connecting the data points, K-12, higher ed workforce, really connecting that data so that a parent and family member can understand, and an educator, okay, so if my child is not proficient in numeracy and starts getting behind in fourth grade, what does that mean for them in terms of their outcomes later? And then the fourth area is educator supply demand marketplace. We have over and over, I'd hear people say, well, we have a teacher shortage. Okay, do we? And if we do, let's figure out where the shortage is and solve for that. You've got to triage. You've got to move fast. The window of opportunity is like this big. And you've got to just build an army of allies to get it done.
And we're going to dig into some of those big, bold initiatives that both of you just mentioned. That's why we're here today. So, Jacob, back to you. You started talking about LEARNs and Governor Sanders' vision for what education could be, will be, is becoming in Arkansas. But what's the overarching, so you're laying the foundation, but this is like, I don't know if anybody's read the LEARNs bill. Good luck to you. It's huge. And as we read it at ExcelinEd, we were like, oh, yes, we like that policy. We like that policy, right? We do that. Tell us about the overarching vision beyond just bringing Arkansas up on, national rankings.
LEARNs is an acronym because in education we love acronyms. So I think it's important for everyone to know it stands for literacy, empowerment, accountability, readiness, networking, and safety. And when we say that it's a bold, comprehensive educational reform initiative, it touches everything from early learning to K-12 to post-secondary opportunity. And some of those core tenets and beliefs that you'll see throughout that bill is that we have to empower parents. Parents have a right to have a seat at the table to look at educational environments that work best for their children and for students. And there's a notion that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for everybody. So we have to create pathways and opportunities. And when we talked about reimagining early learning, when we looked at the state of education, there's probably about 5 major early learning programs. If you're looking at access to high-quality childcare and voluntary pre-kindergarten, it's pretty consistent in the state depending on where that funding comes, if it's local dollars or federal dollars. What we found is depending on who ran that program, they all had their own definition of what it meant to be kindergarten ready. And every single program had a different definition, and every single program was within different agencies. They weren't even all under the Department of Education. So we were like, we're going to put all this in the Department of Education and come up with one definition of kindergarten readiness. And we've heard some of these sessions talk about how do we make that flip from environmental readiness scanning to see if the environment of your early learning is of value and quality to what is the interactions of adults and students happening in those spaces, and then how do we incentivize and recognize that in a state like Arkansas, where there are some very rural parts of the state, there are a lot of deserts and islands where access is a legitimate issue. So we created a network of what we call local leads, and it was a competitive bid. There's a local lead now in every county where they're an early learning provider that we invest with them, and they're tasked with working in the early learning community to provide professional development, identify opportunities, and make sure that we're getting folks ready. A whole lot of work happening in early literacy, and we wanted to really be purposeful in supporting our learners that are most likely struggling. And we knew that third grade benchmark of are you reading at or above grade level by third grade was a big deal. So we talked about standards. Our standards weren't really built in evidence around the science of reading. We saw a lack of phonics and phonemic awareness in our early literacy standards. And our math standards for numeracy, we found that it wasn't strong in procedural fluency because we've made these shifts in education. We've got to find these balances. If kids don't have those foundational years built into them by that third grade, fourth grade readiness benchmark, then they're going to struggle. We can create all the pathways we want. If you have to be able to read to succeed, and we feel really strongly in that. So we've invested by deploying 120 literacy coaches. We've calibrated them. They're in every DNF school across the state. We've invested in teachers. We know that teachers are the number one indicator for improving learning. We raised our starting teacher salary. In fact, the new teacher project did a cost of adjusted for a living. We went from 45th in the nation to starting teaching salary to number one. Right?
What
like
is your
that's a
starting
big
teacher
deal.
salary?
Our starting salary is $50,000 a year.
That's
is
awesome.
the minimum, regardless
that's
of where you
excellent.
are, because we have to recruit, we have to retain. We're investing in professional development. We built out. We now have a definition of what is a high skill, high wage, high demand career tech pathway, right? And we've tasked every high school to have one pathway off the 13 pathways that we've identified, because we know that that's going to be a path for some of our students. And I could go on and on about the impact of learners, but it is comprehensive, and we wanted to make sure that we're going to get it right.
It's huge. And let's not forget parental leave, paid parental leave. That's a good one too, folks. I want to dig in for 1 minute, a question on early literacy, and maybe you can weigh in on this too, Katie. There's this laundry list of things. Okay, we're going to change, but there's always somebody out there saying can't do it. Governor Bush was saying this morning, too hard, can't do it. So talk a little bit about any resistance you have encountered in the field in terms of implementing early literacy reforms, coaching, et cetera.
Yeah, so I get a chance to speak to superintendents and principals and teachers all the time, and I always like to ask them, very simple questions, right? What's the number one priority of a school when students are in our care? What's the number one priority? It's a general question. See, I heard education. So people that work with me said safety. Because when students are in our care, there is nothing more important than we can do to keep kids safe. Now, improving learning is always the expectation. We got to get graduation rates. We want to move third grade readiness rates. What I think some of the challenges that we face is that we don't have a collective vision of what effective Tier 1 instruction looks like. And I always like to talk about these instructional myths, I call them, about we have to meet students where they are. We have to meet them on grade level. And the notion that we hear from a lot of people that you don't understand our students, you don't understand how hard they have it. I understand that students will do what we ask of them, and if we don't have high expectations of our students to push an accelerated mindset, overcoming a remedial mindset is a big challenge. So when you talk about how do you shape that adult behavior, but one of the tasks that I like to give to principals and superintendents is, if you're a principal of a school, most of our principals know here, which teachers are doing a good job and which ones aren't, right? I've been into dozens, if not hundreds, of failing schools. And literally, every time I walk in, I'll go to the principal and say, I want you to make me a list of the 5 best teachers that I got to walk in their classroom that are knocking out of the park, and 5 that that need the most support, and that if we were able to bring in coaches, those who you would target. And every principal, without a doubt, can make that list. The next thing I do is I take that list and go to the administrative assistant and say, can you give me their evaluations from last year? And guess what I find every single time?
Perfection.
They're all the same. They're all highly effective. So we've got to be honest about what is the feedback, because feedback, we talk about Hades practices, is one of the most high yield effective strategies, whether it's in a classroom or for an educator, is how you improve. But I like to share, I read this book called The 100-Day Leader. Somebody mailed it to me. I literally read any book somebody mails to me, and I usually have comments and feedback. Don gave me a book. I gave him feedback. One of the things that he talked about is you have to be purposeful. And I remember when I was a principal, I had a superintendent says, you have to be in the classrooms 51% of the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. But if you make a list of what to do every day and what not to do, getting caught up in day-to-day operations is not being an instructional leader. So you have to be diligent and purposeful about that. And one of the things he said in his book is when you are a principal and you ask teachers to follow school safety protocols, Teachers aren't going to ignore if we're doing a fire drill. We're going to ignore that, right? You're doing lockdown drills, severe weather drills. Safety is a non-negotiable. If you want to talk to me about which grade level goes to lunch, we can talk about that. If you want to talk to me about how we line up for the buses, we can talk about it. But when it comes to safety, as a principal, as a superintendent, that's a non-negotiable. Kids not reading by third grade on level, they are not safe in life. If we address early literacy at the same level that we address safety, we can eradicate this problem with students needing to be held back or not being able to be successful. That is the mindset we're taking in Arkansas. And when we are walking in classrooms and providing feedback and we see people not doing their job, you're not keeping kids safe. That's our number one priority.
So just very quickly, because we've moved a lot in literacy as well, and we've test-driven a couple of change management strategies, if you will. The opt-in approach, where you incentivize people to opt in, and the mandate approach. Our opt-in approaches have worked better than I ever imagined. I mean, we have a new Indiana assessment, and it's a pilot, and 1,700 schools opted in. Today, we have an option for students to take the second grade I-read assessment. It's another assessment. I told my team, this is not going to work. Back when. Now we have over 80% who opted in. So that strategy is one. The mandate strategy, which our General Assembly passed, I supported. You can imagine our behind-the-scenes tables. I will never say anything negative publicly, but I am a little battler. I'm a battler when need be, and I supported the mandate on making sure our teachers are trained with a literacy endorsement. And you can see how that mandate looked if you just Google some articles in April and May out of Indiana. I mean, our teachers union was with us, and we were doing it during a gubernatorial election, in all fairness, which that driving big policy during a gubernatorial election is extra special. But it really flipped on us. And so I would say with that mandate, we got about 80% to where we wanted to get, but I left about 20% on the table just to acknowledge the change management and speed to which we could keep people with us and keep moving. The 20% I left on the table was making sure all of our middle school and high school teachers are trained in science of reading, because we have thousands of readers, non-readers in Indiana, millions across our country sitting in middle schools and high schools right now. And as a high school teacher, I was never taught how to teach reading, ever. So that was my concession in the change management in the short term until we could reset. We will get there 100%, though.
Yeah,
I don't know that has any state passed a literacy endorsement for every single K-12 teacher in their state. Like, you have to.
I'm calling
a lot of us have been focused
Burke.
on
I don't know
early.
the answer to that question.
But that is a real challenge that we need to reckon with as a country.
Actually, you can find the answer to that question, shameless plug, on earlyliteracymatters.org, I'm sure, if you'd like to visit ExcelinEd's website. So let's talk about other difficult but necessary things. And Dr. Jenner, for the audience, I hail from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts that just decided that there should no longer be a standard to graduate from high school. Yet, in the state where I attended university, you have utterly overhauled what it looks like to graduate from high school and provided some rigorous paths for kids to get where they want to be to have a meaningful life after high school. Tell us about high school redesign.
Yeah.
You gave us a little bit this morning, but give us the nitty-gritty.
So I'll just start with some reflection that you all can do. Think about the oldest person you know who graduated from an American high school. Get that person in your mind. If you asked for a copy of their transcript, and you asked for a copy of a transcript in most of any state, name it, any state in the country's transcript today, they are almost identical. And yet the world around us, I don't have to tell you all how quickly it's changing. But the other thing that I'll tell you, there's this old saying, if you keep doing the same thing over and over, you probably shouldn't expect different results. So in Indiana, when we look at our data, our enrollment into colleges going down, even though our current Core 40 was designed to prepare students for four-year college. Number two, our employers are saying we need students with skills. They know how to TikTok, but they don't know how to talk. How about some eye contact? How about a firm handshake? How about when they talk, they're actually, their body is facing who they're talking to and they're not like looking over their shoulder. We have to teach them that skill. Collaboration. We have to disagree better as a country. All of our opinions matter. That's the foundation. That's how we were built. And that training ground starts young. And I walked into an Indiana classroom, which usually when you walk into classrooms, they put on a show. You know it's going to be good. In the 4 years, there's only one classroom that I walked out and was appalled. And it was a classroom where they were debating really tough issues, which is important. But they were debating verbally as if they were commenting on social media. Like, you're wrong, you're a moron, you're wrong. But they weren't hearing each other. That's a skill set we have to teach. And the third thing we hear from our employers is work ethic. But the other thing we see is our enlistment data. And I don't know if you've looked at your data. That's not a data point that I'd studied deeply until this point. But of all the students who walk across our Indiana stage, we were turning down 77% of them who wanted to serve our country. 77% who said, I want to serve our country because of physical standards and character standards. And by the way, many of those are federal requirements. You should look at that data for your state. So that's another pathway we had missed. Our chronic absenteeism is going up in Indiana and nationwide. Student apathy is at an all-time high, and it's most high at the high school level. And in focus groups, you know what they're saying? I don't see the value. So we knew we had to do something. Our redesign work is, yes, a diploma overhaul. We're increasing flexibility while making sure that rigor is still there. Really focused on work-based learning, making sure students have that experiential learning. Research shows that's where skills are developed. It's not sit and get in the classroom. Like all of you sitting here looking at me, which all of you are, except for a couple of people are looking at your phone right now. All of you are looking at me, and the reality is, the students do that in the classroom. You know how this goes. They could be thinking of the 20 things on their to-do list, but they're still looking at you. They're still looking at you. That skill development, we have to get them out and have experiences. And then the credential of value. Indiana's a humble state. I'll say it once. We rank number one in the nation for students leaving with college credit. And so we had to leverage that. Because when we ran the data, about 64% of Indiana students leave with college credit. The average leaves with 13.5 credits. An initial educational attainment step above a diploma, so we call it a certificate. Every state's different there. An initial step is about 15 to 18 credits. So we had thousands of students within 1 to 2 to 3 classes of completing a credential in high school. So we're like, that spigot has been off. We didn't have a system to support it. We are going to turn that spigot on. We are going to change the game because that educational attainment, you all know, that matters in terms of future income. That also causes, and this was, again, check out the headlines in July. It was like reading in April, May, high school flipped to headlines in July. You're welcome to Google it. It was tough because our higher ed, and I'm going to defend them a bit and say...
Just a bit.
Just a bit. Unintentionally, because I have a lot of good... We're working together. They really, really nailed us pretty good, saying it's not rigorous enough, which we saw areas of rigor that we had to increase and tighten. We saw that for sure. But the behind-the-scenes conversation with higher ed is when we support students in earning credentials of value at the high school level, educational attainment, that changes their business model. Because no longer, some students don't have to stay the full 4 years. Heck, some students don't have to stay the 6 years that they are right now. And that was something that I, again, am very, very cautious about sharing publicly, but that is a reality if you go after this in your state. You are going to have higher ed who's going to be watching every step of the way. They should be at the table. They are at the table. But we cannot let the current higher ed business model get in the way of doing what's best for kids, period. So I will take every headline going forward. Although since then, Purdue was the big one. Love Purdue, boiler up. President Chang and I have talked multiple times. He is very supportive going forward. And he hated how that came out. But sometimes you can't help how it works there. But I would say if you go down this path, which many of you are, it's a diploma overhaul for sure. It is also funding what you want to see, incentivizing what you want to see. You will see that in our model with our, we're calling them seals. Other states have seals.
So it's like one rigorous bar for graduation, but then different seals that you can earn.
We have one base diploma, and then we have seals, if you will, in the areas of employment, enrollment, or enlistment. Student could do multiple across the board, right? They're permeable. And then we have an honors level and an honors plus level. The honors level is our push today. It's what some schools are like, oh, it's really hard to get kids here. It's our push today. But other schools are like, yeah, we have most of our kids there. The honors plus level is where they're actually completing a credential of value. So they're taking their random acts of dual credit. They're completing the educational attainment. They have work-based learning. And they also have to affirm skill development. So that is a push for sure. But that push, we have proofs of concept all over our state who are already doing it. By the way, in urban, suburban, rural, poor, wealthy communities, it can be done. And we just have to have access for all other kids. The other thing I'd add, you have to get your accountability aligned to this driver. It has to be academic. You're also going to see us moving towards adding some work-based learning, apprenticeship, adding credentials of value to connect the full system. You're going to see us overhaul our transcript. Yes, we will still lift coursework. You'll also see us looking at skill development and how to affirm that in the credentials of value. And then you can't, when it comes to kids and urgency, you can never let barriers get in the way. I can't emphasize that enough because barriers are always there.
Can I ask another question real briefly, Secretary Jenner? So you also have in Indiana career savings accounts. And I'm curious about the connection, if any, between, well, first of all, what is a career savings account in one sentence or less? And then the connection, if any, between this
Five words. I'm high school. 5 words.
It's
right.
And high school we got a lot to get to, right? And high school redesign. Okay. Because one barrier that can always get in the way is whether or not kids have access to the kinds of alternative opportunities that you're providing. Yeah.
Career savings, career scholarship accounts, CSAs, are an ESA for college and careers, essentially. And it's open to all school types. I think that's really key as we're driving the school choice work, is that people start to get their feathers ruffled when they don't have access. So it's open for all school types. The CSAs, it allows $5,000 per student, sophomore, junior, senior, that is above and beyond tuition support, complexity funding, all of that. It's a separate above and beyond. And that can go to fund everything from transportation to for the work-based learning experience to any other barriers that might be in the way. Like if the school doesn't offer one course that helps the student complete the credential of value, they could use that funding to pay for it. It also really opens up our education market. To realize schools can be the provider, but business and industries could also potentially be the key apprenticeship partner, as can higher ed and others. But it's really our first, and I see our treasurer, Daniel Elliott, elected official in Indiana. The Department of Ed works with the treasurer The treasurer approves eligible students. The Department of Ed approves eligible programs. So it has to be a market-driven credential of value that they're working towards. And then the Commission for Higher Ed approves providers to affirm quality. So we all work together. The first year was last year. We launched, and our General Assembly, probably like many of yours, they start with a minimal budget line because we have to get proof of concept first. So that first year, the law implemented on July, I'm smiling because it was a lot. The law implemented July 1st. We had to have students signed up October 1st. That was a little rocky. It was tough implementation-wise. This year, we have a waiting list. We have a waiting list for kids. It's getting a lot more questions. You're going to see the General Assembly probably increasing funding on that ahead. It's one of our governor-elect's agenda items.
It's really an innovative thing. I would encourage our audience to take a look at it. So in the interest of time, because the title of this session is, of course, Chief's Greatest Hits, we haven't even gotten to, we've only got 2 hits right now. So back to you, Secretary Oliva. We started talking a little bit about teacher reforms, and you mentioned really raising teacher pay in a robust way, paid parental leave, but I mean, the LEARNS Act goes beyond that. Tell us a little bit about the state of teacher recruitment and retention in Arkansas and what you're doing about it.
Yeah, so I think every state, every school district tells you, and actually any industry, if you ask industry leaders, what are some of your biggest challenges, they're going to say talent acquisition, right? Like, how do you get the right people in the right positions? And we talked a little bit about teacher prep programs. How many superintendents say, I hire candidates from a teacher prep program, then I got to spend 5 years mentoring them and developing them, training them to teach them how to be better teachers? So we're taking a really different comprehensive approach. But one is like raising starting salaries. We made sure that every teacher got at least a $2,000 raise, regardless of where you are. Created freedoms for school districts to develop a salary schedule that works best for them, and a starting salary of $50,000 as the base minimum. That's a big commitment from our legislature, our state, to say salaries matter. And we're seeing a difference, especially in bordering states where people are driving over. We're hearing in small and rural districts are saying we can compete now. We had people that lived in our district. Now they're not driving 30 miles to go to a bigger district where they're going to make money. They're actually coming home. We've leveled the playing field. But what we like to say is for recruitment, retention is our recruitment strategy. When you talk about the data, how many teachers are you losing every single year? And when we were looking at pre-pandemic levels to post-pandemic levels, we knew we needed to stop people from leaving the profession. So one, we've got to put it up on a pedestal. One of the things that makes me cringe the most when I was a principal or a superintendent and I'd be in front of a group of teachers is hearing teachers say, I would never tell my children to be a teacher. Right? Like, what is this mindset that we're creating around education? So how do we rally around the state, our business communities, our chambers, our faith-based communities, say teachers matter. Let the teachers teach, empower them, give them the right support, and give them the right tools. But we also developed a big teacher merit pay initiative because we wanted to recognize the best of the best. And when we went through that process, that's a big deal. It's really hard to figure out how to come up with an incentive that recognizes the impact of a teacher. If you're in a tested subject area, it's pretty easy. I can pull your test scores. But my band teacher that had the biggest impact on me, how do I evaluate that? So as we've engaged in our reforms and everything that we've done, we've brought teachers to the table every single step of the way. So when I talked about we wrote new standards, we use Arkansas educators. Now, we brought in some national folks and university folks to help guide that work. But this is going to be a teacher-driven product. When we wrote test items on our assessment, they're going to be Arkansas educators. We involved over 3,600 teachers over the last 2 years to revamp our expectations of what's in the classroom. That's going to keep them in the schools because we're listening to their needs and delivering above and beyond a salary. We're telling them, if this is what you need, we're going to remove those obstacles, barriers, and give that to you. So getting the teachers to buy in and support, well, we brought them to the table and said, help us come up with teacher merit pay. And we did that. So we do look at test scores, and it's tiered anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000. But we wanted to recognize and incentivize the behaviors that we knew was going to have a greater impact on student learning. So if you were mentoring new educators, if you were taking on apprenticeships, if you were in a hard-to-staff area, if you were in a small rural district, these were stackable things that could lead all the way up to $10,000. So we, in our state, collected data called value-added measures. A lot of you had VAM models. When I got there 2 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, we have this awesome VAM test scores in this database, but we never shared the scores with anybody. We just collected the scores, and it went into accountability. Never told a principal, never told a teacher, never told a superintendent. These are the teachers that are outperforming, getting more than years worth of growth. So we created a dashboard and said, we're going to be transparent. We're going to give people data. And now teachers are begging for the data because they want to know. But the first thing I always look at when I do like that value-added measure data is, do we have any high-impact teachers, more than 1.5 standard deviations above the expectations in F schools? Right? Like, I want to know what they're doing. First time we looked at the data, we found 36 ELA teachers that are getting highly effective impact data in F schools. Let's go to their classrooms and figure out what they're doing. You know what they found? We found what I would call old school teaching. Nobody had their headphones on. Nobody was sleeping. The teachers are going to make sure those students are engaged, and they are on task. And guess what? If you have high expectations for students, they can do it, even in F schools. And these teachers are knocking it out of the park. And so we rolled out $10,000 merit pay. We had about 100 teachers get $10,000 for going above and beyond. And we've been visiting all their classrooms to find out what they're doing. And next week, I'm going to go visit a teacher that's been teaching third grade for 42 years in the state of Arkansas. She's turning 70, and nobody's ever told her she gets the highest learning gains out of third grade students than anybody in this state.
Wow. Wow.
So when you start showing up in these teachers with evidence and data that says you're making a difference, when I tell these teachers you're getting better outcomes than anybody else in the state, they're like, me? Nobody's telling them they're doing a great job. We have to do that. Retention is the greatest recruitment tool you can ever engage in.
And I think that's how, to the point made this morning, you get to making an education bureaucracy more than a department that just checks federal papers. Dr. Jarrett, before we need to get to questions, but you mentioned at the outset Indiana's Jobs Board. And, I mean, this is another thing that not enough states, I think, are doing to understand, do we have teacher shortages? Where? What subjects? Tell us about how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, and first I would just say, I don't know that I can read the full LEARNS Act. We're all rooting for it, me included. Do you have a 2-pager?
ExcelinEd's got a 2-pager out there somewhere. I got your back. Yeah.
Well, I think specifically what he talked about regarding teacher incentive, and he wasn't just talking about $1,000. I don't know if you picked up on that. He's talking like $5,000, $10,000. I'd love that 2-pager.
And $50,000 minimum above and beyond.
Somebody
that.
remind me. I promise.
I mean, that's really, really something.
And what we found too is
here we go.
When we said,
what else in Arkansas?
When we said that this is a way that you can mentor and give back, because we have data that says if you're mentoring new teachers, one, the new teachers stay in the profession, and two, it makes the mentor a better teacher too, because they're learning alongside. So we have some formal programs like with NIET. Our enrollment from last year to this year has doubled in every program without saying anything, just because they know if I do this, it's going to make me a better teacher, and I can maybe get additional recognition funds for that as well.
Amazing.
I hear your question.
Jobs board.
Jobs board. So it's not a jobs board, actually. It's a supply-demand marketplace for educators. So it's the old business mindset. How do we connect our supply with our demand? So first step was understanding the demand. And we asked every school, all school types in the state of Indiana, over 2,200 schools, post your demand for teachers on here. What's the position? We can chart where they are in the region. We can chart what types of teachers we need. And it's all public information. But at any time, I can tell you, we need 336 special ed teachers. Most of them are in Northwest Indiana, whatever you might want to know there. But then the connection point, and then I will say just really quick, our school said, can we go beyond teachers? Can we also put instructional staff? Can we put maintenance? So you'll see a variety of jobs. Anything to serve a school might be listed in our demand. For our supply, we went straight to where our supply might come from. The bulk of our supply in Indiana comes from our educator prep programs, some of which are colleges, some of which are other programs. So leveraging who is in educator prep programs and then connecting supply with the demand. Our schools have seen a huge benefit in that they're getting a lot more applicants, because a person who's applying could be like, I want to be a science teacher in Madison, Indiana, but I'm willing to drive 10-mile radius, and then it automatically connects. It's not applying for separate school district. It just connects in terms of the applicant pool. And then for the state, it's been major because we triage the problem. We haven't said we need to solve all the things. We've said, okay, number one need in Indiana, no surprise, special ed teachers.
Right.
Number two need, English learner teachers, because our English learner population is going up and our English learner teacher population is pretty plateaued. Number three is STEM. And we launched initiatives to build it. So I can tell you today, we launched iSeal specifically for special ed. We have 1,100 currently enrolled. Many have completed. We have about 300 vacancies today. English learner, we call it ITEL. I didn't make up these acronyms, so whatever. ITEL, we have 300 currently enrolled. Over 200 have completed. We have approximately 50 vacancies today. iSTEM, we launched that. And all of these we didn't launch at once. We had proof of concept. Okay, gosh, it really worked for special ed. Let's try EL. That worked. Let's go STEM. So STEM was the one we most recently launched. That was in summer of 2023. We have 1,150 enrolled. Over 375 have completed. And we have 140 current vacancies. To give you a sense, you might be like, gosh, that's a lot. We have about 80,000 teachers, 1.13 million children. So, gosh darn, a lot better than where we were, and we'll keep getting better if we focus on triaging the problem at hand and making all of that data transparent. You can look up Indiana's data right now and see for all of our state.
If I was to add to that too, because I like to look at data and push metrics, but when we look at in our retention as our best recruiting strategy, and we measured who were our most high-impact teachers, what we found is those teachers had an average years of experience of 16 years. Yeah. Right? So these are folks that are tried and true and committed to the profession. So if we can get everybody to that point, they'll stay. And I talked a little bit about the literacy coaches we deployed to every DNF school. And I remember I was going through a coaching process, and I was in an F school, and I followed the coach, and they had pre-planned for the week, and I was in the classroom, and they were doing the lesson, and it was interesting to walk, because support happens in classrooms, not in your office. If you're going to lead your school from your office, stay home. Like, you got to get in classrooms, right? So if you're going to lead your district from the district office, stay home. Like, it's the same thing at the state level. You got to get in classrooms. That's where the magic's happening. But I remember sitting in there, and I'm watching this teacher, and this teacher's struggling, right? This is a first-grade teacher. She was struggling. She did not have a lot of assistance support. It was probably about 3 months in the school, and the coach told me this is a big improvement from where they were in the beginning of the year. We're making a lot of progress. They were working on instructional strategies like I do, we do, you do, right? Like just very basic things, because this teacher didn't do that. And there was times where she was delivering lessons, she would look at the coach, I know we planned this, but I feel like we should do this. And the coach is like, of course, you got to make instructional plans, got to make that. And at one point, this teacher looked at the coach in the middle of the classroom and said, I'm so glad you're helping me be a better teacher. She had been teaching for 10 years. And I started thinking to myself, 20 kids a year for 10 years, did we just lose 200 kids because of basic classroom structure that anybody could have walked in and said, let me give you some early, easy tools. Let me give you some quick wins. And this teacher was begging for it. We gotta listen and support our teachers. We're going to keep them in those classrooms, and they're going to make a difference.
Amen. Well, we've got some time, so I'd like to open it up for questions, and I'm sure there are some out there. So please come on up and address your question to either of these wonderful chiefs.
My name is Don Nielsen. I'm with the Discovery Institute in Seattle. I have two questions. We don't have a teacher shortage. We have a certified teacher shortage. Public education is the only institution that requires certification. So first question is, are either one of you, or do you know of anybody, looking at eliminating certification laws? Because it creates a monopoly in education schools, and education schools are, frankly, terrible. And we need to fix them. So to fix them, make them competitive. Second question. The United States has the shortest academic year in the world, in the developed world. Are you, any of you, looking at changing the school calendar and enhancing the number of days our kids are in school so we can compete with people like Singapore, South Korea, and so forth?
Thank you. So quickly, two questions. Can you take the first?
Sure. So when you look at measuring impact, right, I like to look at data, and there's a lot of research that'll say years of experience, advanced degrees like master's degrees, getting additional training or certificates doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a greater impact. So just being a certified teacher doesn't mean you're going to have a greater impact. But I do feel like you need to have some certification or credentials to get a foot in the door, right? And how we support you and give you the access you need to make sure that students can learn matters. We are drowning in our state with teachers that we are yanking certifications away from at a rapid rate because we're letting anybody in the door. Mm-hmm. And they're doing bad things to students. And that's not just an Arkansas problem. So if we're going to say that we're a revered profession, it should be credentialed. It should be something that you have to aspire and attain to. When it comes instructional time, I do believe that days and minutes and time on task matters. And if there's anything we learn from the pandemic, like we always talk about, we're trying to mitigate learning loss, right? I don't think we had learning loss. Kids didn't lose learning. We took away their access to learn, right? And we're starting to see these national conversations in moving to these 4-day weeks, right? And they're going to go 150 days. I struggle with that. I see the research on that says students that go to school in a 4-day week learn, but they don't learn as much as if they went 5. And when you have a short calendar like 178 days, I think there's value in looking at how do you add more time on task and how do you support students more cohesively, because systematic explicit instruction matters, especially for our most vulnerable students, and taking that away or limiting that opportunity is only detrimental.
Dr. Jenner, you want to add?
Yeah, so I wonder in the conversation, or in both of those questions, what's coming to my mind is student outcomes. Like, who's in front of the student, and are they certified? Are they emergency certified? I've seen some emergency certified teachers who far outshine certified teachers. Right. I think we have to look directly at the outcomes, and I am for flexibility in certification and understanding what are the true drivers, what should we really be looking at to determine who should be in front of our students. I think we have to keep going back to the outcomes we're producing. The second question also goes to outcomes, about the school calendar. You all, I don't know that we're using the 5 days of instruction well right now. Maybe you are in your state. Maybe we are in these schools up on the front row. But can I say collectively that all 2,200 Indiana schools are like knocking it out of the park with the 180 days? I think, again, it goes back to outcomes. If you can, do it this well at 200 days, fantastic. Do it this well. If it takes 180 days, do it this well. If it takes 165 days, do it this well. But we've got to keep outcomes as our number one focus, not days and this and that. I think sometimes that can be a distractor.
Thank you. Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you. Senator Lori Den Hartog from Idaho. In either of your states, have you addressed in your policy reforms the teacher prep programs? So addressing, if you see lack of teachers being prepared when they're coming into the classroom. You were talking about districts having to essentially remediate for that with mentors. Have you tackled that prong yet?
Yes. And that has not hit the headlines yet. Knock on wood. But it might be coming my way, so stay tuned. We're doing that right now, as I mentioned, with Governor Bush this morning, and evaluating. We're specifically looking today at science of reading practices. Are we doing the best we can to make sure our teachers know how to teach reading? But more is coming, and it is friction-filled.
Yeah,
Sounds like fun.
And I think, to your point, that's kind of like the next wave. Like, what are we doing in these teacher preparation programs? And one of the things that we were tasked when we looked at Learns and Reform in our initiatives is to do an evaluation. So our team is going through every university's teacher preparation program and auditing their programs, sitting in classrooms, watching professors teach, and we're collecting all that data, and then we're going to standard set it, and we're going to give them a grade. I think our school districts deserve to know how well they're doing on an A through F scale on preparing teachers to walk into the classroom day one ready. And I'll tell you, Katie talked about the battle, the amount of presidents that don't want us to come, the amount of provosts that say they're coming. We have to say we're coming. In fact, we had one university that was fighting our team from even getting on the schedule, and to the point where we're calling the president and saying, we're coming. This is a non-negotiable. The school scheduled the day, and we had like a team of 10 people to go show up and sit in a classroom to watch this teacher teach a reading lesson, a professor, to prospective students. And the professor, on a day they knew we were going to be there, showed up 45 minutes late. Why the students stayed is because there were strange adults in the room. That's the mindset that we are fighting in teacher preparation programs. While we're out here being held accountable for kindergarten readiness and third grade scores, we've got to hold those adults accountable because it's hurting our students.
In a policy measure, I don't know, Jacob, if you have this. Indiana, our State Board of Education affirms if a teacher prep program can exist. So in Indiana, like, this evaluation really matters because we can shut them down.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just say, the presidents have been pretty supportive of our work because remember the politics of higher ed, friends. The presidents are on one side. The staff governing model is on the other side. And so our presidents, many of them are welcoming in to say, yeah, let us know. So just want to say that.
Yeah, and I will say to Senator Dunn Hartog and any other legislators in the audience, ExcelinEd does have a model policy for issuing grades to ed prep providers, so ed prep report cards. So come and talk to me if you need information. One more question before we close it out.
Oh, thank you. Scott Roselle, 240. I wanted to go to your ride along with the 10-year teacher being coached by the 16-year teacher. And you observed that the 10-year teacher was begging for basic practices. Do you think that that is a reflection of poor educator preparation? Is that a bad system, overcoming good people? When you reflect on that a 10-year teacher that just had 200 students go through the class over the course of her career was begging for basic pedagogical practices, how do you square a teacher being in the classroom for 10 years and still not having those basic building blocks?
Whopper of a question, and you have 1 minute, sir.
So I go back to that system. That system's failed her. She's doing the best she can with what she knows. And a lot of people, if you ask them, this is why I love education, there's a lot of problem identifiers, but not a lot of problem solvers. Everybody can sit here and tell us what's wrong with it, but nobody's coming up with answers. That system failed her. She didn't have a mentor. She had bad administrators that weren't walking in those classrooms and being honest with her. And it was a teacher that's doing what they know best to make sure that they can survive the day. That's not how you thrive. And that's why we need to reimagine getting into classrooms and supporting educators with boots on the ground.
Which is just love for our teachers, right? Everybody join me in thanking these two amazing state leaders.